So this guitar's been kind of blowing up the internet, and I've been getting all kinds of questions from you guys. Why not take today to compare the $900 PRS with the $10,000 OG? I got this guitar about 2 weeks ago now, and I've had some serious time to get to know it, sit on some sessions with it, but more importantly, you guys had some things that you wanted to say, so I wanted to address some of the comments on the demo I did on this video. Curious to know your thoughts on the neck. That was my big hang up with both the SE Silver Sky and the SAS. The thin satin finish felt too coarse for my hands and really slowed me down. I love the Fiore satin neck because it was way smoother than the SE Maple neck. To my hands, this feels really smooth to me, but it definitely has a different feel than my Coreline CE24 Semi-Hollow. This one, I guess, has kind of a satin gloss finish. They certainly feel different, but they're both soft to me. If anything, this one's a little bit softer. This has a wide, thin neck, and this has a patterned thin neck. The first thing that my buddy Corey said when he got this guitar in his hands was it was really chunky. Considering that these are supposed to be both thin necks, this one definitely has some more meat to it. Every damn clean tone kills. I gotta say I agree with this. I really love the clean sounds on this guitar, but the jury was out on the heavier tones because I went back and watched my demo. And the thing is like when I'm doing a demo, right? I'm sitting in front of an amp, I'm feeling it. You can see me get into that moment. And oftentimes, I'll have a different reaction than when I go back and listen to it. So if I'm really feeling a guitar because I'm in the moment, my mind might confabulate, oh man, this guitar is amazing. And then I go back and I listen and I'm like, that doesn't sound how I felt. One of the most important things about an instrument is, how does it make you feel? Does it inspire you? That doesn't mean it sounds good. You get Stockholm Syndrome. You're on an island with this guitar and there's nothing you can do, so you're like, it sounds the best! Until you plug it in and listen back and you go, oh wow. Okay, this one isn't about the guitar, but I figure I will address this at this point. I try to always say nice things on the internet, so I appreciate the review of this guitar. Thanks for putting all the work into this video. It helped me make my decision. But I have to ask, does anyone really enjoy all the shouting? Maybe it's just not for me. To each his own and all that. There's at least 20,000 people subbed, so I guess it's just me. I have way too much anxiety and tension in my life to watch such an angry and shouty channel. Laugh out loud. Best of luck, man. It just isn't for me. First off, thank you. What a nice way to say, I think you're obnoxious, you're really loud and angry. So here's the thing, guys. I grew up in the theater and in a radio station and listening to super loud music. So everyone was loud, everyone was verbose. I learned a long time ago from, a guy named Albert Einstein that energy transfers. So if I have energy, whether you think it's good or bad, if I'm giving it to you, if I'm giving you all of my focus, if I'm giving it to you, that there will somehow be some kind of transference through me staring at this lens and you sitting at home. I'm trying to be a better person. This is how I wake up in the morning. I was just wired this way. PRS pickups are so sterile. I hear this all the time. PRS guitars are super beautiful, but they have no soul. What the hell's going on? That leads me to my experiment today. The pickups that come in this guitar are the 8515S. The S stands for the overseas iteration for this Swamp Ash Special SE here. You'll find American 8515s in this. Tonight we're gonna party like it's 8515. 85 stands for 1985 because that's when Paul came together with the first T&B pickups. The pickups you'll find in all those early custom 24s. Kind of like the PAF of Paul Reed Smith, because if you go online, take a peek. If you can even find sets of T&Bs, they're going for $1,000 a piece now. And those are the holy grail for Paul Reed Smith. 85 stands for 1985, and 15 stands for 2015, which is when Paul decided to kind of attack a reissue of the original T&B pickups. I've always said that they are just the creme de la creme. But if you go watch any interviews with Paul, he's very careful to say that they're not exactly a copy, that they are in the spirit of. So if you say it doesn't sound exactly like a T&B, Paul will say, good, I hope it sounds better. How much does this actually sound like this? Especially considering that there are all those people out there, the tone geniuses, that don't believe wood has any factor at all, that it's really just down to the pickups. So essentially, if these pickups sound like these pickups, they should sound the same, despite the fact that this is mahogany and maple and semi-hollow versus swamp ash, maple neck, maple fretboard, rosewood fretboard, maple top. swamp ash top. Semi-hollow construction, full-blown, all the wood construction. So how faithful are these pickups to one another? How does it compare against the real thing? So I figured this week the experiment would be to have the Swamp Ash Special SE, a $900 guitar, against the CE24 Semi-Hollow, a $2,500 guitar, against my original 1986 Ghost Eyes Custom 24, a $10,000 plus Paul Reed Smith with the original T&B pickups. How much do they sound alike? How do they feel by comparison to each other? What am I getting for the difference? PRS SEs are mostly crap. Worst stock pickups ever. Better to save up for the good stuff, but don't say that in front of the fanboys. Well, fanboys, let's dive into it today with this test. Let's see if this thing holds up. My idea was to play all three of those guitars the exact same thing through the exact same amp, go back, edit it all together, then watch it back like a giant mega mix and see which one sounded better to me so I could actually speak to the video itself before I go and edit it for you guys. Spent over 10 hours yesterday going down the rabbit hole between these three different guitars and really trying to understand what am I getting for the money. It was not what I was expecting. I learned a lot myself and I'm gonna share it with you guys today. Before we do any of that, I really wanna talk about this guitar, the Custom 24. This is the guitar that started it all for Paul Reed Smith. But if you look on the back of this headstock, is number 670. It's within the first 1,000 Paul Reed Smiths ever produced. And this is certainly one of the prizes in my collection and the first of my Sweet Switch era Paul Reed Smiths that kind of gave me the bug. In particular for the T&B pickups, which I have fallen in love with. When Paul was being interviewed in, I want to say, in the early 80s, it was to find a midpoint between Fender and Gibson. Paul Reed Smith didn't start building guitars because he wanted to build a better instrument. It's because he couldn't afford the instruments he thought were the better ones. He clearly had a lot more ingenuity than a lot of people I know. I could barely build a Lego set. Meanwhile, Paul Reed Smith's building himself speakers, cabinets, winding pickups with the Dremel. It makes sense because every once in a while, a total freaking genius comes along. He's just someone that always found how to get what he wanted by doing it himself. One of my favorite stories is he talks about how he actually got a guitar to Ted Nugent. He showed up to the Capitol Center with guitars under his arm, and then he goes, "I'm late, where's the stage?" And everyone just assumed that like he was supposed to be there. By the time he got in and he saw all the roadies, he chose his guitars, which, as we know, they're pretty freaking awesome. Let's show them to Ted. And Ted Nugent is famously one of the first to have adopted Paul Reed Smith into his guitar arsenal. He tells another story about how he talked to Peter Frampton about, oh, let's make this guitar together. And Peter had all these ideas. He wrote them all down. Then Peter never called him. Then he shows up backstage at another gig, finds Peter. Hey man, here's the guitar you ordered. And then Peter gave him money because first off, I'm sure it was badass. That dude that I met backstage, it's like, oh yeah, let's fictitiously put together some crazy guitar. He thought I actually ordered it when I never called him and then just built the guitar. Because Paul showed up with that guitar, Peter Frampton started playing that guitar. I mean, it was a big deal for Paul Reed Smith. And this was towards the height of his career, you know, after Frampton comes alive and things are still blowing up for him then. But it also says something about Paul Reed Smith. He's a go-getter. He's like, oh yeah, I love your ideas for that guitar. Oh, you never called me? You don't want to pay me? That's fine. I'm gonna make a guitar that's so freaking rad, that's so awesome. I'm gonna run backstage and I'm gonna show it to you and you're gonna just give me your money. And that's exactly what happened. Paul gives an example of using the song LaGrange by ZZ Top. My boy Billy Gibbons. And he says that one of the solos is clearly on a Les Paul and one's clearly on a Fender. Back in the day, you had your single coil pickups like your Fenders and then you had your Les Paul. There was no intermediary. And that was kind of what paved the way for Paul Reed Smith, is finding the middle. When Paul was really thinking about opening his factory in 1984 in Annapolis, that's kind of a really dark time for both Gibson and Fender. Neither one of those companies were on the top of their game, so there was a real wide open market. The whole thought process for Paul was, I'm gonna make a guitar that does the things in between a Fender and a Les Paul so that you don't need to have multiple guitars at a gig. And that's truly why I believe that this guitar has fit so well into the classics of guitars. You now have a Les Paul, you have a Fender Stratocaster, and you do have a Paul Reed Smith. You just say PRS and people think of this shape. And the idea was he was gonna make a 24 fret guitar, had a 25-inch scale. Les Pauls had 24.75, Fenders had 25.5. The body was gonna be somewhere in between the cutaway and feel of a Fender, but still have the violin cut of a Les Paul, down the middle. It wasn't until Paul started really kicking ass that he realized not only was he making a guitar that was gonna be a classic, but he was improving upon a lot of things that he didn't even realize he was going to do, because he just set out to build a guitar because he was broke and wanted something as good as a Les Paul. And the thing with Paul Reed Smith was it was based on three things: how it looks, how it feels, and how it sounds. And starting with the looks, the first thing for me, the birds. This is just a timeless thing. Of course, there's always those people that, oh dude, that looks so ridiculous, I hate the birds, just give me the dots. Sure, they're not for everybody. The Paul Reed Smith birds are as classy and beautiful as you get. And on these early models, this one being a 1988, you got a Brazilian rosewood fretboard. And Paul thought that was a classic thing because his mom was a bird watcher. He saw the silhouettes of birds, thought it would be a beautiful thing, and I agree. And it's a little homage to his mom. How sweet, Paul. The crazy thing is that in the week that Paul completed that guitar, that he sold to Peter Frampton, that he sold, more built and then kind of, hey man. He went back and forth to the Capitol Center, to all the concerts in that week to show them his guitar, and he got a crazy following. He went to Lynyrd Skynyrd, he went to Al Di Meola, Aerosmith, and the funny part is you see Al Di Meola has his own model. I've seen pictures of both Slash and Brad Whitford playing a Paul Reed Smith. You want a Gibson, you want a Fender, you got a Paul Reed Smith! A lot of people think that 1985 to 1991 is considered pre-factory, because that's pre-Stevensville factory, which is a 100,000 square foot factory. In Stevensville, from 1985 to 1991, there was an Annapolis factory. So that's completely inaccurate. Before 1985, so anything from 1984 and earlier, that's pre-factory. If it's 1985 to 1991, I lovingly call it the Sweet Switch era. That's when Paul was exclusively using Brazilian rosewood fretboards on custom 24s. Before they had all the CNC machines in Stevensville. It's a lot more handmade. My wife got me this CE24 hollow body, and it's the last guitar she ever bought me. I was so unappreciative of her. I've actually seriously apologized because I was a jerk. My wife did this little scavenger hunt where she had me go around the house, and eventually I found this guitar with a bow. What's the first thing I say when I see the guitar? Is that a bolt-on? And I completely act underwhelmed and then start chiding her about how she could have called me, she could have called my friends, they would have been able to help her better. Why would she get this? I didn't hear about this model at the time because I never paid attention to bolt-on Paul Reed Smiths. I didn't have a problem with them, and I've said this in other videos, a lot of the Paul Reed Smith fans never were into the CEs or any kind of bolt-ons. They were always kind of the black sheep of Paul Reed Smith. Why would you have a bolt-on when you can have a neck like this? Many people, including myself, have learned that bolt-ons are awesome. And the people that shun them are the people that usually haven't played them. Oh, I'm not rich. Sorry I played an awesome instrument and that you didn't. I started playing this guitar a bunch and it grew on me. And I realized that not only is this a great guitar, it's one of my favorite Paul Reed Smiths, and as you notice, I have over 40. So the question really became, when I was getting all of this different feedback online, all these people are watching your Swamp Ash Special SE video, they're buying the guitar. First off, was my review completely accurate because I was so excited about the guitar? And secondly, how good do those pickups really sound, and how close are they to the 8515s and the T&Bs? So the first thing obviously was to listen to it clean and to kind of go through all the different options. With both the CE and the SE, they have three-way toggles and push-pulls that do different things. Obviously, position 1, 2, and 3, they're gonna be the same, but what do I do about the other three positions? And then with the Custom 24, you have a 5-way. I'm gonna have to decide a certain position that's not gonna compare. I'm not sure all these positions are gonna line up because it's not 1, 2, 3. It's actually 1, 3, 5 correspond with 1, 2, 3. So I had to figure out what do I do with 4 and 5. First you have with the SE, the CE, and the custom, position 1 against position 1 against position 1. With the SE, position 2 against position 2 for the CE against position 3 for the custom. For the SE, you have position 3 against position 3 for the CE against position 5 for the custom. So when you initiate the ASO1 pickup, which is this middle pickup by pulling this out, 3 pulled on the SE is going to be 2 pulled on the CE, and it's going to be position 4 for the Custom 24. So it's 2 against 3, nothing on the Custom 24 because nothing lines up. And then the last position, 1 pulled against 1 pulled over here against 2 from the Custom 24, which is really interesting because the early Custom 24s were wired where they had the whole humbucker and then they had 1 coil from the rhythm pickup but it was out of phase. So you'll see the out of phase logo anytime it goes to position 2 on the Custom 24 because it's out of phase, which gives you that weird quacky sound. Let's check out how it sounds clean between all three of these guitars. I want to know what you guys think of that, okay? So that's demo number 1. I think all three guitars sound really, really good. In fact, there's no question to me, and I'll say this right now, that these guitars excel the most for clean tones, for my personal taste. One comment actually said, considerably more top end than I expected. Nice tones and a great demo. They're completely right. The Custom 24 in particular with the T&Bs shreds through my eardrum, but it's cool because it really cuts through. One thing I also noticed with this guy is there's kind of like a little bit of a mid-range honk to it that I'm not sure I dig, that I didn't notice when I was first playing it. So then I did this kind of cowboy lead thing because I wanted to know what it sounded like kind of breaking up the clean on my VHT amp. That's crazy because this guitar is loud. Both this and the Custom 24 to my ears are almost ear piercing in the sense that that VHT has a lot of headroom and you can kind of hear that this thing kind of compressed on the clean a little bit, which means it's quite touch sensitive, but it's kind of interesting how it broke up the amp. The Custom 24 to me sounds like somebody turned up the treble and the bass. It's more articulate to my ears than this guy. And the CE, it's kind of the most balanced of all of them. It doesn't cut through as much as the Custom 24, and it has a little bit more of a mellowness to it, which I like. Then I wanted to see what it sounded like distorted, so I kind of put it on like a mid-level gain and did this arpeggio that I could kind of just repeat for this demo for you. So take a peek. Thank you for bearing with me 17 different times through, so you guys are troopers. You could really hear the difference in the sounds. This is when I started noticing that there's kind of a fuzziness to the low end, kind of a thumpiness. It sounds cool for leads, a little bit loose in the lows. So this is when I started getting frustrated in the middle of the night, because when I first started going through the demo where I got into heavier tones, everything sounded horrible. All the chugs were farty. They were over compressed. It sounded like it was actually distorting my preamp. I go back and check my preamp preamp is fine. I go back and check the original signal, signal's fine. I wasn't putting any kind of compression on it, so there's no reason other than the guitar actually farting for it to sound like that. I go back into my amp room and I'm like, there's gotta be something wrong. And I plugged this guitar in and I realized that even though I'm having a great time, when I put my ear right next to the Marshall 412 cab, I'm hearing this kind of farty compression that is in like the low mid-range that I'm just not digging when I'm using a lot of distortion. Not every amp and every parameter matches up perfectly. My VHT in particular, it's extremely transparent, it's a great sounding amp, and you can get really crazy distortion on it and have it sound awesome and have all of the beauty of the actual pickups come through. And in this case, I was bummed out even when I was going back in. It was 3:30 in the morning before I went upstairs to like clear my head. I had to go back into my studio and plug into my Kemper because I thought, you know what, I'm not plugging in all my heads right now and trying different cabs and figuring it all out. Why don't I go to my Kemper, an amazing tool? Let's see how it sounds. Here's some Nirvana. Now that sounds way more acceptable to me. The cleans are what make the T&B and the 8515 and the 8515S what they are. Those tones are fantastic, but when you put a lot of distortion on it, they're not shining as much for me. The T&B pickups probably sound the best on the lead position for me. I still love that sound, that lead sound, but in the other positions, not so much for me. Now here's my redone Metallica demo, where I'm just playing the end part on loop. Tell me what you guys think. Mind you, I had already recorded that on the VHT and then I re-recorded it with the Bogner Ecstasy patch that I used, and I had to dial in the EQ on that, where normally I just plug in my guitar and go. What I learned is that all three guitars definitely have a high-end presence to them. There's something about the T&Bs that certainly live in that ear-piercing stratosphere that they'll cut through like a knife through a mix. Surprisingly, the CE24 handled the distortion overall the most consistently across the spectrum, despite being a semi-hollow body. But I also gotta say that there is a surprising amount of consistency between the T&Bs, the 8515s, and the 8515Ss, considering you're talking a $900 guitar against a $2,500 guitar against a $10,000 guitar. There's no question the Custom 24 feels the best. There's something about those old PRSs that are just amazing, besides the fact that when you play a guitar for 30 years, it certainly gives it mojo and feel from doing this for years. But I realized that if you're playing heavy metal and you really want super tight rhythms, these pickups aren't the right ones. They sound great with the cleans. I love the AS01 tones. A lot of telly and strat kind of jangle to them. Certainly outside the normal PRS spectrum, and for $900, this is a great feeling, aesthetically amazing guitar. But it's not the CE24, and it's definitely not the Custom 24. And all of this just reminds me why I love instruments in the first place, because there is a time and a place, and certain guitars go better with certain amps, and certain people have certain feels that inspire them in a certain way. What guitar is right for you is up to you. But please, in the comments below, tell me which ones you like the best. Is it worth it, the difference between the $900 SE to the $2,500 CE24 Semi-Hollow to the $10,000 Custom 24 that started it all? What I can tell you is that I'm really tired because I stayed up all night trying to figure out which pickup goes to which. If you're wondering why I shout and I look crazy and disheveled, it's because I'm neurotic about guitars and I report for you. Why don't you smash that subscribe button already?